my name is Shaylin, and I'm one of our EF Gap Year consultants here at EF Gap Year. And I've been with EF since 2015. I've worked on a lot of different projects with our organization, and Gap Year is probably one I'm most passionate about, and it's been a really fun time being involved with these programs. So I'm really excited for tonight. I think that it's going to be a really great session. We're actually joined by two of our alumni parents tonight, Adam and Andy, whose students went on our Gap Year program. So there's going to be a really incredible conversation with them, just hearing more about their experience. So this parent panel, it's going to be Q&A style. So it's going to be all about the Gap Year experience from pre-departure to return. So we're going to talk about things like Gap Year perceptions and how their student was impacted by this experience. So before we dive into that discussion, I want to give you some context on really who we are here at EF. I think it lays a really nice foundation for this conversation that we'll have with Adam and Andy, and really why we do what we do with these Gap Year programs and the different programs that we offer, just so you can have a little idea, and then we'll dive into the Q&A portion. If you have questions during the session, if you want to pop them into the Q&A, things tend to get a little lost in the chat, so pop them into the Q&A. Andy, Adam, and I will all have access to that. So just feel free to pop anything in there, and then we can get to that as it sees fit. So we're going to hop on to the next slide here. Okay, so like I mentioned, I just want to share with you a little bit about EF and who we are. So simply put, EF is the world leader in educational travel. So we've actually been in business for close to 60 years, and we've helped millions of people see new places and experience new cultures and learn new languages and really just discover new things about the world and about themselves, really. So as you might imagine, this deep expertise and experience running educational travel programs for so many decades has been incredibly valuable as we navigate the ever-changing, world landscape and educational landscape and things along those lines. So in addition to our Gap Year programs, we're also an education partner. So we partner with different high schools and middle schools and colleges across the country. And we really are what we like to call like globally local. So I am actually one of over 50,000 EF staff, which is pretty wild. And we have offices, over 500 offices, I believe it is, in over 100 different countries all over the world. And this matters because we really have boots on the ground in all of these destinations where our students are traveling because, we ourselves in some capacity live or work there. So in addition to, that support, it really, on the ground, it really helps us, kind of firsthand to understand these areas, and also with our experience in education helps us to understand the shifting educational landscape that is kind of unfolding right now. So, and this is really why we built these programs, because we understand, like you do, that what it takes to be happy and fulfilled and successful in this modern world, it just looks a lot different right now than it did even a handful of years ago. And now more than ever, we're coming to understand that real growth and learning can really happen anywhere, and it doesn't have to happen within the four walls of a classroom or on a college campus necessarily. So in short, our programs are designed to help students thrive in an ever-changing world. We want to give them the space and the tools and the experiences and really the confidence to take on the world. We want to help them to get out of their comfort zones. We want to allow them to discover more about themselves. We always like to say themselves, the world, and themselves in the world. So now I want to dive in a little bit to the different lengths of programs that we have. So we offer semester programs and our full Gap Year program. So our semester programs are between 10 to 16 weeks, and our Gap Year program is a 23-week-long program. So the semesters run in the fall and the spring. So those are great for students that are maybe deferring from college for a semester, or maybe just want to start with something a little bit shorter. And then the Gap Year is going to run kind of in tandem with the academic calendar. So it's going to look pretty similar to an academic year with a fall semester, a spring semester, and then a winter break in between. So I always like to mention this slide to keep this in mind as we go, that regardless of which GAP program you choose and which you choose to enroll on, this is kind of a breakdown of what's included. So flights and transportation, activities and excursions, accommodations, some of the meals, 24/7 support, and then mentorship as well. And I want to zoom in on that global support and mentorship piece for a second. So From this moment right now, essentially, all the way to when you're on the road traveling, you're going to have a whole team of amazing people that are helping you at all times. So, for starters, you have all of our programs are cohort based. So you're traveling with between, depending on the program, between 15 to 30 students, and you really kind of almost are like a little family in a way, which is really cool and special. And then on the ground support, we have our tour directors and local guides. Our tour directors travel with our groups. They take care of all the logistics with getting from point A to point B and just are really incredible people and resources to have on the program. We also have I'm going to skip ahead one. We have student life coordinators that also travel with our students, and they also kind of like almost act as like an RA. So they're there just to offer additional support and resources to students while they're on program. And then we have our program advisors that work with our students leading up to their program, and they're incredible. They offer a lot of support. They help with things like packing and just like working through some of the feelings that might come up as you're preparing to leave for one of these opportunities. So I want to dive a little bit into these programs. So I want to start with the GAP semester program. So like I mentioned, generally speaking, well, we'll start with our semester programs that are 10 weeks long. Generally, they're going to be between 10 to 16. So these fit really well within an academic calendar. So I'm going to start with our Changemaker semester. So again, this is really high level, but I just want to buzz through this so we can get to chatting with Andy and Adam. The Changemaker program travels to Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Peru, and Ecuador, and that has a really big focus in NGOs and nonprofits. Our students have the opportunity to do an orientation at the United Nations University for Peace. It's really great for students that are interested in either being in Spanish-speaking countries or doing more service-oriented work. This is a great option for them. Really cool semester. Our Voyager program is also really popular. It is 3 countries, Australia, Thailand, and Japan. And this one's more of like a deeper cultural immersion that also incorporates some service work in Thailand as well. But it's just a really incredible sort of compare and contrast of these 3 very distinctly different countries and cultures. So that one is becoming rather popular. And then our Pathfinder is probably our most popular of all 3 of them semesters. This is usually the one that tends to fill the quickest. This one travels all throughout Europe, England, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Switzerland, and Italy. And it is meant to be an opportunity for students to gain different exposures to different industries and potential areas of study, kind of explore different career paths, hence the name Pathfinder. And then we also have these really unique first semester abroad programs. So for all those semesters I just mentioned, you do have the option to earn virtual college credit if you want to. The first semester abroad programs are unique in that you're actually taking in-person classes. And we partner with a lot of, the world's top colleges and universities, Penn State, UT Austin, Colorado State University, and many more to really facilitate a lot of these experiences. So we have 2 options under this umbrella. First is Mosaic of Spain. So for Mosaic of Spain, you attend classes at EF's International Language Campus in Malaga, and then you experience kind of more of a curated curriculum at the University of Granada's Center for Modern Languages. So, it's really cool because you're taking classes and then you're doing field excursions to different surrounding countries that really mirror what you're learning. So it's meant to be like versus when studying abroad in Italy and taking calculus, like you're studying in Spain and you're taking classes that actually connect with the environment that you're in, which is what makes these programs a little bit different from a traditional study abroad. And then we have our Colorado State University Global Challenge semester, which is really interesting as well. This semester, our students actually start in Colorado at CSU's Mountain Campus, and then they travel to Costa Rica, Panama, and Mexico. And the themes for that are really focused in on like creating a sustainable future, a little bit more focused on environmentalism. And our students actually travel with CSU professors. And if you complete that program actually, and you keep at least a 3.5 GPA, you're actually automatically accepted into CSU's Honors College. So that's just something fun to think about too. So that's a very high level overview of those semester programs. Finally, we have the Gap Year program, which is our, it's what we're known for. It's our most popular offering that we have. It's our 23-week-long program. Like I kind of mentioned before, it's broken into 2 semesters. The first is more focused in guided exploration. Our students spend 6 weeks in Europe, 3 weeks in Australia and 3 weeks in Thailand, kind of having a blend between exploring different, global issues and themes, exploring different industries, kind of similar to some of the Pathfinder elements, and then also, continuing that on same kind of framework onward in Australia, and then doing some service work in Thailand. And then the second semester is more focused in cultural immersion. So our students have the opportunity to choose between studying a language at one of our EF international language schools, or participating in an international internship in Stockholm, Sweden. So a really great program. It's a really well balanced. It's a really great blend between experiencing a lot of different places, but also really feeling what it's like to be fully immersed in in a particular location. So obviously that was a very quick run through. We usually do a little bit of a deeper dive for our info sessions that we typically host on Thursday, but I want to make sure we can chat with Adam and Andy for most of today's time. I do want to share the pricing. I think it's just always helpful to have an idea of what a range for these programs as far as tuition looks like. Our semesters are going to range from around 19,000 to around 25,000, depending on which program. And then the year program is going to be let's just say 44,000, $43,750. So all of these prices are located on our website. This is all public information. So, I encourage you to take a look at all of this, and just keep this in mind as you're sort of planning financially. Okay. With that being said, I want to get back to Adam and Andy. I want to give you both the opportunity to introduce yourselves. So happy to have you both here. Really excited to dive a little bit deeper into this conversation here today. So for starters, Adam, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to you. Tell us a little bit if you can, about Griffin and the gap year he did, and where you're coming in from tonight, and just a little quick overview about where Griffin took his gap.
Yeah, sure. So Griffin did the full year gap year, and he was interested in trying to get proficient in Spanish. So he took all of his elective, where you can select the components you're going to do in Spanish speaking countries. So he did Barcelona for language study. And the format was different on his year than it is currently, but he did Barcelona, then the Dominican Republic for service work, and then he was back in Sevilla for his internship component. And it was great for me because I got to visit him in Spain twice, in Barcelona and Sevilla. But he loved it, and what was great for him is that he was already an accomplished independent guy in high school, but this really cemented his independence and his decision making, and really just catapulted him into adulthood. He's now at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California, studying physics, and couldn't have been happier with it. And so much so that his sister is now following in his steps, and she'll be doing the gap year coming up in this September.
I love that. Thanks so much, Adam. And we'll dive a little bit more into Griffin's experience in a minute here. Andy, I'm going to pass the torch over to you. If you want to share a little bit about where you're calling in from tonight, and a little bit about the program that Tucker did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shaylin. So we live just outside Boston in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Tuck had graduated and applied to colleges, and then made the decision to defer college to take the opportunity to go on a gap year with EF. Overlapped with Griffin a bit. He did his language study in Barcelona, then he went to the DR, and then finished up his gap year doing an internship in Sydney, Australia, which he loved. And I think for us, it was a bit of a mix, similar to what Adam said, just to be able to kind of grow up a bit, gain some independence. He with COVID during a lot of his high school years, he didn't have an opportunity to travel and do some of those things that you learn to do throughout high school. And the gap year really provided him that opportunity, and he came back a totally different person, much more mature, much more independent, much more confident. And he has since gone to Colby College up in Maine. He's a freshman there this year and is doing very, very well, enjoying his time there, and truly feel that without the gap year, he wouldn't have been as successful in college.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Andy. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here just so you can all see us a little bit more clearly here. And we can kind of dive into a little bit more of some of these questions about this whole experience for Griffin and for Tucker. So I want to talk a little bit about, let's start actually from the beginning of all of this. And I think that where a lot of our students are right now and a lot of our families are at sort of that decision point, especially for a lot of our families that are, that are seniors. They're, getting ready to graduate, and a lot of decisions are having to be made. And I want to understand a little bit more about what that process was like for both of you. As far as, family discussions and what, played into your decision and all of those sorts of things. It's a big decision to make. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that process. And we can start with whoever feels inspired to begin.
Yeah, I'll go first. So it was interesting because Griff's mom and I are divorced, and one day Griff and his mom both presented to me that this idea that Griff would go on a gap year. And in my head, it was ski, I live in Colorado. So I'm like, oh, if you're going to be a ski bum, I'm not paying for that. And, you should really, he did great in high school. So I'm like, you should just continue right into college rather than losing momentum. And then he educated me on EF gap year. I had not been aware and hadn't known anybody that's been on it before. So once he told me it was service and education focused and the curriculum and all that, I was immediately on board. And, for a young adult these days to have this opportunity to just take a breath with the pressures of, again, COVID high school years and just all the pressures of academics and athletics that he did and stuff like that, I thought it was a perfect opportunity for him to go do that before he embarks on college. I had no concern that he would go to college after gap year. There was going to be no loss of focus there. And he had a lot of good objectives of what he wanted to accomplish and just taking that time. So I was on board immediately.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Andy, how about for Tucker?
Yeah, so our experience was a bit different. My wife had thought about a gap year, I think for some time throughout high school, and thought it might be a good idea for Tucker when the time came. So we discussed it. We thought, hey, this might be a really unique opportunity for him, and we presented it to him. I think he was actually a little hesitant at first because he wasn't aware of kind of what it entailed. It meant a whole year, out on his own in the world. And he hadn't done a lot of traveling. He hadn't, done a lot on his own. So I think he was really hesitant about it. And then when we started talking to EF and the counselors there, and he started to get the information and read about the different opportunities to go to the different places and what it entailed, he really became enthusiastic about it. And, we ultimately deferred to him and said, it's your decision whether you want to do it. We just would encourage you to get the information. And once he started getting the information, having the conversations, he got very, very excited about it. He picked all the modules that he wanted to do on his own after reviewing the information. And he felt like it was a really good thing to do. I think he was very nervous going into it originally, but within the first week or so, when he hit the ground, and they went to London first and then Barcelona, he was off and running. He met some great people, and so everything was smooth sailing right from the start.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question for you, Andy. So, because this is interesting how Adam, it sounds like, it was kind of Griffin that was leading the conversation for this, and Andy, it sounds like it was you more so, and then trying to bring Tucker up to speed. And I think that it's almost a little bit, from my experience working with families, it's almost a little bit trickier when the parent is really excited about this, and the student maybe feels a little bit like, am I going to be, fall behind? My friends are going right to college. Like, there's a bit of overwhelm that I think sometimes comes with not following the status quo and not taking a path that's nonlinear, which is really what this is. It's something that's different.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, I know you touched on some of the resources that that Tucker really leaned into for helping him to feel that buy-in. But what would be your advice for maybe some parents that are on our call right now that are dealing with that, where they see the benefit of this for their child, but they want to make sure that they see that as well? What would you say to those families?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would encourage them to take a similar approach to what we did, which is just provide the information, encourage the child to um, talk to EF, to get the information, to look at what the programs have to offer. We right from the start said, hey, this is ultimately your decision if you don't want to do it. And he had some of those concerns, right? Like, I don't want to be behind all my friends in graduating, and we tried to say, like, there's no race to the end, right? Like, once you're
Yeah,
out of college, then that's it. You're looking for a job, and whatever. There is no race to the end, and you're not going to be behind any of your friends because you have a whole new set of friends when you go to college. So try to kind of help him understand that this is not going to set him behind, but then really just encourage him to listen to listen to the information, to get the information, ask his own questions about some of his concerns that he has to EF, to the counselors that we had the conversations with. And then once he was kind of leading on all that, and so he was able to ask those questions and get the reassurances about some of the things that concerned him. So it really felt like his own decision, and it was his own decision. We were definitely supportive of it, but we allowed him to kind of drive the information gathering part of it.
yeah. And do you feel like that ownership that he took over that was helpful in him having that clarity?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it really helped him understand what the program was, what he was going to get out of it, and what a really unique opportunity it was for him, and something that, he wouldn't otherwise be able to do, potentially for the rest of his life. So I think it gave him the ownership in it, and it just helped him not only be more comfortable with it, but really get excited about it when he was thinking about, oh, I'm going to Sydney, Australia, and I'm going to work in an internship, and I get to pick kind of what field I want to do, or what I want to do there. And so, yeah, so having him drive it definitely, like, got him engaged in the process and really helped him make that decision without us as parents saying, this is what we want you to do. We think this is good for you for, XY reason. It kind of helped him grow organically into this and really feel confident about the decision to do it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that ownership is so important when students can take that on. It's, whether they ultimately decide to do this or not, they're fully owning that decision. And I think that's a big life lesson. And I think it's really important in this and in a lot of other things too. I know I think you both kind of touched on this a little bit. A lot of our students, there can be a lot of general like nerves and worries and anxiety about the idea of doing something like this. It's a very emotional thing, even if you don't expect it to be necessarily initially when you sign up. Adam, I'm going to direct this question towards you, since it seems like, Griffin he was kind of gung ho on this from the get go. But talk to me a little bit about, what some of those emotions maybe came up as, you were making this final decision, or maybe like leading up to closer to actually leaving for the program. Like, I'm curious to hear more about that from, from his perspective
Yeah,
via
there
you.
was no hesitation from Griffin at all. Once I got on board with him, he put a lot of work into high school between academics and athletics and stuff. So he felt that he would benefit from having just a year to explore and to learn in another way before embarking on college, because he's going to take college very seriously. So he was excited the whole way through, never any apprehension about it. He's been lucky that he did a lot of global travel through his whole life already. So traveling to him is nothing new. So he had no apprehension about that. And in terms of like falling behind peers of his in high school, going off to college, that didn't bother him at all either. So he was just
Yeah.
excited about the opportunity to explore and try to learn more Spanish. and
Mhm.
people.
I love
It's
that.
interesting.
Good for him.
One of the introductory slides you had was said like your gap year people or your cohorts or your friends for life. That truly happened for Griff in terms of his cohorts. I think there was 100 people in his gap year along with Tucker, and he still says now they're all in touch, and he consider all 100 of them lifelong friends. And he made his best friend for life a guy on gap year that he was on all of his segments with him, and he met his girlfriend on gap year too. He's been with for a year and a half now too. So
Oh, I
he's
love
very
that.
strongly about the social connections because there's such a deep bond to go through all these experiences together in the different units that you do, and to be there experiencing it all together and traveling and becoming independent together, and it really developed really deep bonds for him.
That's incredible. That's so great. And yeah, I think that's what's so unique about these experiences is that, you're in this small group of people, but you really become almost like a family, really, because you're traveling together and, you're living in the same places and, you're sharing a really life-changing experience together. So I'm so happy to hear that, that was the case for Griffin and that it sounds like he made some very important relationships during that time, which is great. I want to pass it back to you a little bit, Andy. Anything that you would add to the question I proposed as far as like general nerves, worries, anxieties, anything that you feel like would be helpful for our other parents on the call today to hear about?
Yeah, so I mean, it certainly sounds like Tuck was a bit different than Griff going into it, where Tuck hadn't really done a lot of traveling, and he hadn't really had a sense of independence on his own, making decisions so like for him, it was nerve wracking. Like we'd done a bit of traveling, but mostly to the Caribbean and places like certainly going to Europe for and Dominican and Australia for a whole year is way outside his comfort zone. Um, there was a lot of nerves with that, and I think a lot of nerves like just going like they all met in Boston just that first day we dropped him off. I think he was very, very nervous about it. But like I said earlier, like once he got there, everybody, and very similar to what Adam was saying about Griffin's experience, like everybody was such good people, such a good group. They very similar to Griff's experience, like his friends that he met there are some of his closest friends to this day, and he also his girlfriend now that he's been dating for a year and a half was on his trip and two of the modules. So I think he had a lot of concerns about it, and I don't know that there's a way to address those or quell those concerns that you have until you just go and do it. A lot of like he did ask the questions going into it, like he had an understanding, but until you're off and away and on your own, it's hard to really understand what it's going to be like if you haven't had those kinds of experiences. So I think that the nerves about that and the worry is going to be there for a lot of kids. But you just have to kind of trust that what you're doing is going to be great and going to be good for you. And once they got over there, like when they were living in Barcelona, like all of a sudden they were traveling to Prague, to Berlin. They were jumping on trains and planes and booking Airbnbs on the weekends and stuff. So it like that concern and that worry about like I don't know how to do this like went away very quickly, and they worked as a group of friends that figured it all out, planned it. Like he never called home to ask us anything, other than to just check in. Like so I think like he had those worries going in, but they were like kind of calmed down very, very quickly once he got with the
Once he
group.
got there. Yeah, I love that. And I want to make one point and then I want to segue into another question. I know, of course, for Griffin and for Tucker, they were both finishing up high school. This was before they were deciding what they wanted to do for college. I also want to mention this that these programs are also, if you're a parent on this call right now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my child is 20 years old and they're in college and they want to do this, that is also totally great. Like our programs are available for students ages 18 to 22. I would say the majority of our students tend to be 18, 19, 20, and then usually we'll have a handful of 21 and 22-year-olds on the program. But sometimes it ends up being, a mix bag depending on the semester. So just for you to know that, because I know we're talking a bit about this, but I'm working with a lot of families actually right now that just finished their freshman and their sophomore years of college and are realizing that they don't really necessarily know maybe what they want to be studying, what they want to be doing, and using this as a way to kind of pivot and for a little bit more self-discovery. So I just want to mention that. And then I want to talk a little bit. I know someone had mentioned a question in the Q&A, which was actually something I wanted to touch on a little bit because this is a really big time, like I mentioned at the start of this call, for college acceptance, deferrals, all of those sorts of things. So I would love to hear a little bit about what that process was like for Tucker and Griffin. Adam, I know Tucker is at Griffin's at Cal Poly, and I know because it's kind of an interesting thing with him where he talk to me a little bit about his deferral process. We'll
Sure.
just leave it at that.
Well, and I can give two examples since my daughter is going to be on this next gap year in September, and she's gone through the same process. But so for Griffin, he was applied to colleges during his senior year of high school, got accepted to Cal Poly. That's where he wanted to go. Applied for deferral. As a California public university, they only grant deferrals for medical and military reasons, and so they rejected it. And so he declined his acceptance because the gap year was very important to him, the growth and the time that he wanted to experience there. And so he declined, and then he, during gap year, applied to more universities again. So he applied all over again. Interestingly, through his gap year experience, he really loved Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And so he applied to universities in all those places as well, got accepted to universities globally and Cal Poly again. He really wanted to go to university in Sydney, and he got accepted to one of the best science programs there. But because of the timing of everything, with them being in the Southern Hemisphere, he would have missed the first semester by the time he got back and everything. So he decided to go to Cal Poly. So the moral there is that he really wanted to go to Cal Poly. He got declined on the deferral, just declined them and reapplied and got in. So it was great. My daughter, who's going this September on gap year, applied and got into NYU. NYU grants deferrals for gap year. So it's an application process. And she got granted her deferral. So she's going on gap year in September for the year, knowing that when she comes back, she's enrolled at NYU for 2025.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I love the fact that even though Griffin knew he wasn't going to be able to do the deferral with Cal Poly, that this was something that was so important to him. And I think that's a good lesson there of sometimes you just have to kind of lean into what you want to do and know that, I mean, that opportunity was still available for him when he got back. So that's awesome. And congrats on for Macy getting into NYU and deferring and everything. And I'm glad that was able to be a smooth process. I know we have a lot of students that have joined us that have deferred from NYU, and they're usually pretty good about that. So I'm glad that was the case. Andy, anything to add on that topic?
Tucker's experience was more similar to Macy's, where he had applied to all the schools that he was going to apply to his senior year, got into Colby, which is where he wanted to go. After he was accepted, he had made the decision to go on the gap year. So went to the school and requested deferral. They were very, very supportive of it. He did have to apply for it. He had to write about what he was going to do, what the benefits, what he hoped to get out of it. And then he had to write kind of a summary upon completing his gap year that he submitted to the school. But they were very encouraging about it and very supportive.
That's great. That's awesome. So speaking of support, I'm going to use that as a segue into talking a little bit more about the on-program experience. I know we've been talking a lot about this preparation leading up, and I know we both both of you touched on this a little bit as far as relationships and friendships that were made through this experience over the year. I would love to know a little bit more about how you felt that that Griffin and Tucker were supported throughout the year, as far as some of the pieces that I was talking about before, with like the tour director and student life coordinators and advisors and things like that. Talk to me about that support for them, if you can.
So I can jump in here. So what I recall Griff telling me is that the in-country, in-location resources and guides were fantastic. They became friends with them, relied on them, really respected them, and got a lot of value out of them. In terms of the kind of the EF kind of HQ coordinator, they were there and very valuable for if there were changes to any kind of travels or larger programmatic things like that. Very helpful and responsive. But I don't think there was a lot of interaction so much once he was on gap year with those folks. It was more the in location people, and Griffin really had a lot of positives to say about those folks.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Did Griffin have a student? I'm sure he probably had a student life coordinator on his program as well.
Perhaps, but
he may not
I
have
don't.
mentioned that too, but
Yeah, he was running a pretty independent show for himself. So
yeah,
I
he was doing his thing. Andy, anything that you would add there as far as support that Tucker had on program or leading up to program or anything like that?
No, I think leading up to it was where we saw it the most. I mean, again, like he was tentative about whether he should be doing this or not. And so I think like just getting all the information once he signed up for it, getting him comfortable with where he's going to be living, what the residences are like, what the experiences are like, what to expect. So he felt like very knowledgeable going into it about what to expect when he got to each one of the different modules. Again, like once he was there, he was very independent. Like he never called us for anything. So I don't know exactly, that he needed a lot of support. He did tell me that he felt very fortunate. His housing that he was placed in both in Australia and in Barcelona were really good, great experiences. I know that there were others on the trip that either had to move or change housing or it wasn't ready. And he did mention that EF was there to support everybody who was on the ground, like helping them if they needed a different accommodation, they were moving them around. So, but as far as his experience on that, it didn't seem as though he needed it much, or at least he didn't share with us.
That's great. That's awesome. And I'll provide this little piece of context just as you're all listening into this. So we actually used to do homestays for our language option, for our language module, for our full gap year program. And when just think of when you're staying at a relative's house, right? Sometimes you're kind of rolling the dice what that experience is going to be. Sometimes it's great and they're, everything's awesome. And then other times it's not the best fit. And sometimes you don't know that until you're there. Because of that, we've actually moved away from that model, and all of our students that will opt for the language module for the second semester of the gap year will be at EF, more so like dorm style accommodation. So I just mentioned that if you're like, well, wait, what's that? But that sometimes would happen, and we would have to be there to support our students and be able to pivot. But this new method is has a little bit less variables to it. So for Macy, for her gap year, she won't have that particular experience, but hopefully
and I'll just add in, having visited Griffin in Barcelona on his language where he was at a homestay, his went well as well. But I know a lot of the folks, his cohorts that were on the trip, and I heard stories about other homestays and that didn't go as well. But again, EF was there, transferred them, made it all seamless, and everybody was happy at the end. But the dorm style living, like in Sevilla for his internship, and I visited him there as well. That was fantastic. He liked it. He had a roommate. It was kind of mimicked, a U.S. kind of college dormitory experience, because I think they were at a Spanish university dormitory there. And so they really enjoyed that independence there, but still, and feeling that kind of like we're in college, but we're not there yet. So it paved the way for him now at his freshman year in college.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, wonderful. And then I always like to ask this question: what would you say were the highlights from the year program for Griffin and Tucker? Like, what was that moment where you felt like they were like, oh my gosh, this was like the absolute peak of this program for them?
If you're asking from my experience or from his, it might be different. I know for Tucker, he absolutely loved his internship in Sydney, Australia. Again, they were living in like an apartment. He had a roommate. He was going to work every day. He had just an amazing experience in Sydney. So, has said, "Oh, I want to go back to Sydney. I want to work there. I want to do another internship there. I want to work there after college." So, for him, that was the highlight of the modules. From a parent standpoint, it was just seeing his growth, his personal growth, and his independence develop when he was out there and just sharing with us the types of things that he was doing. The study course is one thing, but then they would all go out with their friends. As I mentioned, they would travel. So just seeing him really grow over the course of a year, he developed so much independence, so much confidence, grew like socially. So that for us was like really, really enriching to see your kid who went off on this like really unbelievable experience, but just came back like, really an adult and so mature and so confident.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you've seen all that growth. And I think that that's really what we're aiming for here is we want our students to come back knowing who they are. And I don't like to say, having changed, but having become like uh, a more authentic version of themselves. Because I think a lot of the times, I mean, just think about all the pressure of high school, in so many ways, so many different types of pressure. And I think that sometimes it can get kind of confusing for people and students to, kind of figure out, hey, who am I? Like, what's actually important to me? Do I care about this, or do I just care about this because, this person cares about that? And I think that, when our students can come back and have a clearer version of who they are and what their values are and what's important to them, that's a huge win. And I'm really happy to hear that it sounds like that was Tucker's experience. And then I want to ask you that kind of talk a little bit about that with you too, Adam, as far as like that growth that you've seen for Griffin and maybe what your hopes are for Macy as well. But before I do that, I know we had a question that popped up in the chat. Someone wants to know what Tucker's internship was in Sydney, Australia. If you want to share a little bit about that, Andy.
Sure. Yeah, he was placed with basically a goods wholesaler. So it was a small Australian company that did wholesale product distribution, and it was all types of different kind of things. Think like beach shop related things, but they worked all across Australia. So he helped, and the gentleman who owned it, it was a relatively small operation, but had him do some accounting work for him, had him do some merchandising work, and then even kind of shared with him kind of the process and operational part of it behind shipping coordinations.
Sounds really interesting. That's great.
Mhm.
Adam, I'm going to pass the mic back over to you. Talk to
Yeah.
me a little bit about Griffin's growth through this experience.
Yeah, clearly his independence and just his self-direction was the biggest, change in him throughout the year. I mean, he came into it pretty strong and independent, but he came out of it even more so and very directive around what he wanted to do. One interesting change for him is that before going on gap year, he was very focused on, he thought he wanted to go to university in Los Angeles or a big metro area. So he's looking at USC and UCLA. And after gap year and living in Barcelona and some other big cities, he grew up in Boulder, Colorado. He decided he definitively did not want to live in a giant metro area. And so he was back at Cal Poly, where he's at now, and where he was looking before, but because he likes the nature there. So that was just an experiential direction for him that he learned on gap year, that he didn't want to live in a giant city. But going back to kind of each of the modules and what he gained from each one, surprisingly, he would answer instantly that his favorite part was the Dominican Republic. And I would have guessed that would have been his least interesting part. He's been in the Dominican as a kid, but he loved just the camaraderie of the whole cohort team working together. They all lived in the same hotel together. They are all working in the same environmental project of planting coral stems and planting mangroves under the direction of a program there. And then they were also teaching local children about environmental concepts and ocean conservation. He thrived on that. He absolutely loved it. If I think back to Barcelona, the thing he took away from there is that he didn't want to live in a big city. He enjoyed Barcelona, but the bustle and the horns and the cars and all that, he decided that's not how he wants to live. He loved the exploration in Australia and Sydney so much. I mentioned that he applied to university in Sydney after that experience. And that's really where he wanted to go to university, just didn't align for him on a calendar. But he is going to do a semester abroad starting in August through Cal Poly in Sydney. So
That's
he's
great.
and the gap year got him really hooked on Australia and Sydney. But also he loves Sevilla. That's where he did his internship. He worked for a technology company writing research papers around market research. Really enjoyed that, and just the independence, because the internship is all about independence. You're living in your own independent apartment with a roommate and getting yourself to work and doing a job, and living like a young adult. So he really enjoyed that as well. So each phase of it really gave him an education and an experience to take away.
That's great. That's awesome. And I know we had a question pop up in the Q&A, just a quick one, but curious about this. Did Griffin or Tucker go the college credit route for the program or no?
Not for Tuck. He did not earn any college credits.
Yeah, not for Griff either. And I'll explain a little bit why. So I mentioned that he applied out of high school and then he declined. And so he was going to apply again for Cal Poly and other schools. And he got information that if he took the credit, he'd be coming into college as a freshman. He'd be applying as a transfer student. And there are different ratios of acceptance as a transfer student versus a net new freshman. So we declined the credit.
Okay, good to know. Interesting takeaway to that.
Yeah, I think with Tuck, he could have earned for his Spanish language immersion that he did in Barcelona, he could have earned, but he already had enough Spanish in high school that he had already kind of met those base level requirements. So I think there was an opportunity if he hadn't taken all the Spanish he had already done.
Yeah. And everyone, I would say, like in regards to the credit piece, I would say, generally speaking, probably between like 20 to 30% of our students will opt to get credit. If, credit is something that's for just our parents tuning in, if credit's something that's important to you, definitely talk to your gap year consultant about it. And they can kind of walk through what the options could look like for you. I have some families that I'm working with now that are really keen on getting credit. So we're doing more of like the Mosaic of Spain and CSU Global Challenge semester program. So there's certainly options, and it's all about just figuring out what's best for you. I have one other question for the two of you, and I always like to ask this question on these panels, which is if you could give one piece of advice to families that are on this call and trying to figure out what's next and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed and nervous about kind of taking a little bit of a chance on this, maybe, doing something different. What piece of advice would you give to them?
I mean, I guess for me, it would just be to talk to EF and get the information. It's, I didn't know anything about it going into it. My wife had done a bit of research. So even for me, I wasn't really sure that this was going to be the best option until I was able to get all the information. But, I think to some extent, you have to take a bit of a leap of faith. Like there's going to be some concerns and some doubts, I think, across parents and children, but just really get educated on what the opportunity is and what the options are. And then I think the decision whether to do it or not will come more naturally.
Great advice. Adam?
And mine is let them go. They're gonna go off in that world, and EF Gap was great because it's guided, it's supervised, it's controlled in a way. and structured. And my son came back so much more, not even so much more mature because he was already mature, but just so confident and independent. And I think now as a freshman in college, 1 year delayed, he is so much more comfortable with the college experience because he's already been away and just has a lot of confidence. And so much so, obviously, I'm sending my second kid to go do the same, following his footsteps.
I love that. I see someone popped in the chat, why EF over other gap year programs? And I think you've kind of touched a little bit on all that from everything that you've shared, but anything else that you would answer to that specifically?
Let me pop in there first because EF was presented to me by Griffin and his mom, and I hadn't researched and really known about gap years. Again, to me, a gap year was going to be a ski bum until I got educated by them. So they had already picked it, and then I got involved, and it looked great. When my daughter, looking at it this time, we researched other gap year programs, and there's nothing that really parallels the full year experience of EF in terms of geography and having the different modules that you can select and make it bespoke for your interest, but also having the language. So Macy's doing Japan language, having the service, having the exploration, and that the global diversity. There's really, we couldn't find a program that even came close to it. And then Griffin was so pleased with his experience, we couldn't, there was no reason not to follow in the footsteps.
That's great. Happy to hear that.
Yeah, and for us, it was a bit the same. Like we looked at what the programs offered, and we really felt that having kind of that language immersion, the opportunity to engage in community service as well as a business internship really provide a very well-rounded experience. And we didn't find anything else that could really compete with EF. So we were on board from the outset.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay, let me just see if there's any other questions in the chat here. Okay, some of these are a little specific, but let's see. So I can kind of touch on this with the accommodation piece. I'll just go ahead and answer this question. All of our students are in different accommodations throughout the program. It's going to depend a little bit on which particular program that they're on, but mostly like hotel style accommodations, or our students will be in like more dorm style or apartment style accommodations based on which part of the program that they're doing. And then Shannon, your question.
Well, I'm sorry, I would just add there that you always have a roommate. So there's no, like, you just mentioning hotel style accommodations. You're never in your own solo room. I don't think, at least.
You're right. Yep, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Which is good. I think so. Like your kid's not just, living in a hotel alone in Sydney or London or Barcelona.
Exactly. Yes. So 100%. And I just want to say, to both of you, I really appreciate you both being on this call with us today and answering these questions and kind of sharing a little bit more about your experience. I know there's a few other questions in the chat. I'm going to try to get to a couple of these. I know some of them are a little bit more specific, in which case that's going to kind of bring me into my next point, which is, well, what do I do now, right? So if you are someone that's looking to kind of figure out what's next, definitely set up some time to chat with your gap year consultant. They're going to be reaching out to you tomorrow to kind of see what your thoughts were on all of this. If they haven't touched base with you already, that person could be me, could be one of my teammates. But essentially what my recommendation is, if this is something that you're curious about and interested in, definitely get that conversation started if you haven't already. All of our programs we're kind of in an interesting time where they're filling very quickly. Sometimes we're able to create like multiple departures for certain programs, but in a lot of cases when they fill or certain dates fill, we get wait lists going. So, you set the pace, but if this is something, that you're interested in, it's definitely important to have that conversation now. We also have our first group onboarding session that's happening for all of our students that are traveling for the fall in 2 weeks. So it's really awesome if you're able to kind of have things figured out before then so you can join for that. So just things to keep in mind. We are kind of coming down to the wire for the fall, and the spring tends to be follow quickly because a lot of people are making plans for the whole academic year. So just keeping that in mind. You have time, but time's also of the essence type of a thing. So make sure to get those conversations going. And Adam, Andy, I really appreciate you both being here and sharing your experience. And I'm super excited, Adam, that Macy's also going to be joining us, and this was really inspiring to hear. I feel like it was just a really flawless experience for both of them, and that makes me feel really great about our programs and really happy for them. And yeah, so great that we were able to make this work with the two of you today.
One last comment to add, that the benefit for the parent is you get to visit your kid in these international locations. And it was fun when I visited Griffin twice in Spain. He was my tour guide. He was very proud to show me the cities he was living in. And that was the turn of the tables from when he was a kid living under me.
Yeah,
I love that.
We had that same experience. We went to Barcelona, my wife and I, and got to spend some time with him. It was fantastic. He showed us all around the city, took us out. So it was great.
I love that. I know it's so cool when it kind of shifts from where, parents are leading the charge to, oh, wow, my child's actually taking me around this place. It's a really cool thing to be a part of. I love that. Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you both. Thanks everyone for being here. And like I said, you'll be hearing from your gap year consultant. Feel free to reach out to them if you already have their number with any questions from that have kind of sparked in your brain from this. And so happy that we were all able to be here.
Thanks, Shay. Thanks, Adam.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
you got it. Bye.